Stand atop Huaca del Sol today, and you can see the Pacific Ocean glittering 40 kilometers to the west. This pyramid contains over 130 million adobe bricks. It is larger by volume than any single structure in ancient Egypt. But almost no one outside Peru has heard of it. Rewind 700 years, and you would have found this pyramid painted blood red, surrounded by a city of 20,000 souls, ruled by warrior priests who drank from golden goblets shaped like jaguars. Sacrifice, gold, desert, silence. Using cutting-edge AI reconstruction, we are about to walk you through every century of the Moche's story. From the first adobe temples rising in 100 AD to the ruins buried beneath sand dunes that archaeologists are still excavating today. The Moche did not emerge from nowhere. Around 100 AD, on the northern coast of what is now Peru, scattered farming communities began building something unprecedented in the Americas. They lived in one of the driest deserts on Earth. The Atacama and Satura regions receive less than 2 centimeters of rain per year. But dozens of rivers flow down from the Andes, carving green valleys through absolute desolation. The Moche, named centuries later after the Moche River, controlled at least 8 of these valleys. They built irrigation canals that stretched for kilometers. They planted maize, beans, squash, and peppers. They harvested anchovies and sea bass from the cold Humboldt Current. And then, in the Moche Valley itself, they began constructing monuments. Huaca del Sol rose in stages. Each new ruler added another platform, another tier. Workers carried millions of bricks stamped with makers' marks, symbols identifying which community contributed which section. This was not slave labor. It was corvée, rotational service owed to the state. The pyramid grew to 41 meters tall. Across a plaza, the Moche built Huaca de la Luna, the Temple of the Moon, smaller but covered in intricate murals. Gods with fangs, spider beings, anthropomorphic waves. The iconography was already fully formed. The Moche arrived on the historical stage with a complete mythology, a rigid hierarchy, and an artistic tradition so sophisticated that scholars still debate its meanings. Between 200 and 450 AD, the Moche expanded. They did not build an empire in the traditional sense. There was no single capital. Instead, 2 distinct polities emerged. Southern Moche culture, centered on the Moche and Chicama valleys, and northern Moche culture, centered near modern-day Sipán and Pampa Grande. They shared iconography, technology, and religion, but they were politically independent. Warfare was constant but ritualized. Moche ceramics depict combat in exhaustive detail. Warriors wore quilted cotton armor, copper helmets, and wooden shields. They fought with maces and spear throwers. The goal was not to kill, but to capture. Prisoners were taken back to temple complexes, stripped, and paraded before the gods. Then they were sacrificed. Archaeologists at Huaca de la Luna found the remains of at least 70 men, ages 15 to 39, sacrificed over several centuries. Their throats were cut, some were dismembered, others were left exposed to vultures. This was not cruelty. It was theology. The Moche believed the world operated on reciprocity. The gods gave rain, fish, and fertile soil. Humans gave blood. During this period, the Moche became master metallurgists. They cold-hammered gold and silver, then developed techniques for soldering, gilding, and alloying copper with arsenic and tin. In 1987, archaeologists working at Sipán uncovered the tomb of a man now called the Lord of Sipán. He was buried with over 400 objects. Gold ear ornaments the size of saucers, a crescent-shaped gold headdress, a scepter topped with a golden rattle, a peanut necklace, each peanut individually crafted from gold and silver. The precision is staggering. Moche goldsmiths could create hollow beads smaller than a peppercorn. The Lord of Sipán was not a king in the Mesopotamian sense. He was a warrior priest. His tomb contained the remains of 3 women, 2 men, a child, a dog, and 2 llamas. All were sacrificed to accompany him into the next world. The Moche Golden Age lasted from roughly 450 to 550 AD. This is when their ceramics reached a level of realism unmatched anywhere in the pre-Columbian Americas. Moche potters created portrait vessels, ceramic heads so lifelike that scholars believe they depict specific individuals. One vessel shows a man with a cleft palate, another shows a woman with a facial tumor. These were not idealized gods. They were real people, rendered with clinical precision. The Moche also produced erotic ceramics in astonishing variety. Explicit sexual acts between humans and skeletons, between humans and supernatural beings. For decades, Western archaeologists dismissed these as pornography. Modern scholars recognized them as theological statements about fertility, death, and the cyclical nature of existence. During this period, the Moche built Huaca Cao Viejo, a pyramid in the Chicama Valley that contains some of the most spectacular murals ever found in the Americas. The rebellion of the objects, the revolt of the artifacts. In one scene, weapons and musical instruments come alive and attack their human owners. Scholars still argue about the meaning. Was it a creation myth? A cautionary tale about hubris? A historical event encoded in metaphor? In 2006, archaeologists discovered something extraordinary at Huaca Cao Viejo, a tomb. Inside was a woman in her late 20s. She was wrapped in 20 layers of cloth. Beside her were weapons, scepters, and gold objects identical to those found with male warrior priests. Her forearms and hands were covered in intricate tattoos, spiders, snakes, and crabs still visible on her mummified skin. This was the Lady of Cao. She ruled. DNA analysis suggests she died around 450 AD at the height of Moche power. Her discovery shattered assumptions. For decades, scholars believed Moche elites were exclusively male. The iconography shows male warriors, male priests, male leaders. But the Lady of Cao was buried with all the regalia of supreme authority. She may not have been unique. At the site of San Jose de Moro, archaeologists have found 8 richly appointed female burials. Some contain ceremonial goblets used in sacrifice rituals. The Moche were not a patriarchy in the way we assumed. Power was theological, not biological. If the gods chose a woman to rule, she ruled. By 550 AD, the Moche controlled 400 kilometers of coastline. Their population may have reached 50,000 or more. Workshops in the Moche Valley produced ceramics that were traded as far south as modern-day Lima and as far north as Ecuador. They built roads, aqueducts, and terraced fields. They domesticated the Muscovy duck. They wove textiles from cotton and alpaca wool in complex geometric patterns. They were, by any measure, one of the most sophisticated civilizations in the world. Around 550 AD, everything began to collapse. The exact cause is still debated, but the evidence points to climate catastrophe. Between 536 and 594 AD, the Earth experienced a series of volcanic eruptions so massive they altered global weather patterns. The eruptions ejected sulfur aerosols into the stratosphere, blocking sunlight and cooling the planet. In Europe, this period is called the Late Antique Little Ice Age. In Scandinavia, it triggered the legend of Fimbul Winter, the endless winter before Ragnarok. In Moche territory, it triggered El Niño events of apocalyptic scale. Normally, the Humboldt Current brings cold, nutrient-rich water up the coast of Peru. This feeds the anchovy populations that feed the seabirds whose guano fertilizes Moche fields. During extreme El Niño, warm water displaces the cold current. The fish disappear. The rains come, not gentle rains but torrential floods that destroy irrigation systems and bury fields under meters of mud. Around 600 AD, a megaflood tore through the Moche Valley. Sediment layers at Huaca del Sol show evidence of catastrophic water damage. The lower tiers of the pyramid were buried. The city surrounding it was abandoned. At Huaca de la Luna, archaeologists found evidence of desperate ritual activity. Mass sacrifices, dozens of men killed in a single event. The priests were trying to appease the gods. It did not work. By 650 AD, the southern Moche heartland was in terminal decline. Huaca del Sol was abandoned. The population scattered. Some moved north, others retreated into the highland valleys. In the northern valleys, the Moche tried to adapt. They built a new capital at Pampa Grande, further inland, away from the coast. The site contains a massive pyramid, Huaca Fortaleza, that rivals Huaca del Sol in size. But it was never finished. Around 700 AD, Pampa Grande was deliberately burned. Archaeologists found evidence of systematic destruction. Roofs were torn off, walls were toppled, storage rooms were emptied. This was not a conquest. It was abandonment, possibly violent, possibly ritualized. The Moche were not invaded. They did not lose a war. They lost their environment. Between 700 and 850 AD, Moche culture fragmented. In some valleys, local rulers clung to power, maintaining older traditions. In others, new influences appeared. From the highlands came the Wari, an expansionist culture based near modern-day Ayacucho. The Wari built roads, administrative centers, and fortified compounds. They imposed a different ideology. Where the Moche celebrated individuality, portrait vessels, unique tombs, personal regalia, the Wari emphasized uniformity, standardized pottery, mass-produced textiles, bureaucratic control. In the Jecatepec Valley, Moche and Wari styles appear side by side. Some tombs contain Moche ceramics alongside Wari tapestries. This was not peaceful syncretism, it was cultural collapse. As the old certainties broke down, people adopted whatever symbols promised survival. By 800 AD, the southern Moche valleys were dominated by Wari-affiliated groups. The northern valleys fragmented into smaller polities. The site of Galindo, built around 700 AD, shows signs of increasing militarization. High walls, defensive towers, storage facilities built into inaccessible cliffs. The ceramics from this period lose their realism. Portrait vessels disappear. The intricate erotic and mythological scenes are replaced by repetitive geometric patterns. The artists were gone, or the patrons were gone, or the knowledge was gone. Around 850 AD, even these successor cultures collapsed. The Wari abandoned their coastal outposts. The northern Moche valleys splintered into micro-kingdoms. At San Jose de Moro, the last Moche-style tombs date to around 900 AD. After that, silence. The Moche did not vanish. Their descendants lived on. But the civilization that built Huaca del Sol, that created the portrait vessels, that buried the Lord of Sipán in gold, that civilization was gone. For over 1,000 years, the ruins lay beneath desert sand. The Spanish conquistadors rode past Huaca del Sol without realizing it was man-made. They thought it was a natural hill. The Moche had no writing system. They left no chronicles, no king lists, no historical records. Everything we know comes from archaeology, from iconography, from the objects they buried with their dead. The first scientific excavations at Moche began in the early 1900s. Max Uller, a German archaeologist, worked at Huaca de la Luna and recognized that the ceramics predated the Inca by centuries. He named the culture Moche after the river. In the 1940s and 50s, treasure hunters looted thousands of Moche tombs. The objects flooded the international art market. Museums and private collectors bought elaborate gold headdresses, ceramic vessels, and textiles with no archaeological context. Entire tombs were emptied and destroyed. The looting continued for decades. In 1987, the discovery of the Lord of Sipán changed everything. Walter Alva, the Peruvian archaeologist who excavated the tomb, worked with armed guards to prevent looters from stealing the find. The tomb was intact. Every object was documented in situ. For the first time, the world could see the full splendor of Moche elite culture. The Lord of Sipán became a national symbol. His gold headdress appeared on stamps, banknotes, and tourism posters. The Museo Tumbas Reales de Sipán, built to house the artifacts, is now one of Peru's most visited museums. In 2006, the discovery of the Lady of Cao forced a re-evaluation of Moche gender roles. In 2008, archaeologists at Huaca de la Luna began using ground-penetrating radar to map the site's interior. They discovered sealed chambers, untouched for 1,400 years. Work continues. Every year, new tombs are found, new murals are uncovered, new questions emerge. The Moche left us no words, but they left us their art, their tombs, and their pyramids. And from those, we are slowly reconstructing their story. Stand atop Huaca del Sol today, and you can see the white towers of Trujillo rising in the distance. The city has sprawled to the edge of the ancient site. Squatters have built homes on the lower terraces of the pyramid. Erosion eats away at the adobe. Rain, rare but devastating when it comes, dissolves the bricks. Archaeologists race against time. Every year, more of the pyramid crumbles. But the Moche refuse to vanish. In 2018, researchers using drone-based LiDAR mapping discovered a vast network of previously unknown structures buried beneath the sand south of Huaca del Sol. In 2021, a team excavating at Pañamarca uncovered a processional mural 30 meters long, depicting a ceremony so complex it will take decades to interpret. The Moche built a civilization in the desert. They turned sand into fields, fish into gold, and human lives into art. They were destroyed by forces beyond their control. Volcanic winters, megafloods, the whims of the Pacific. But they built monuments so massive that they still dominate the landscape 1,400 years after abandonment. The Moche are not forgotten. They are still being discovered, a civilization that refused to die.